Reading charts is really one of the most important parts of the case interview. It really demonstrates an ability to synthesize complicated information very quickly and also to use the information in order to make problem-solving decisions around the case. We were looking at market segments before, and this really is kind of a typical case where you have a few different segments, some revenue information, but in a kind of an indirect way. It doesn't explicitly say, here's the price, here's the quantity, what's the revenue? It gives it in a bit of a convoluted way. We have willingness to pay, books per year, and there's actually some missing information. If you're thinking about, well, how do I find the total revenue for each of these categories? I would need a price and a quantity for each of these segments. Willingness to pay is kind of a proxy for price, but could get people to stumble and say, I'm not really sure if this is what I'll do. Maybe I'll take the average of each of those, or maybe I'll try to price this just below. It can really kind of confuse some people, but that's kind of there as a distraction. The other thing is they have books per year. Books per year, well, what about the price of the books? That's not even given here at all. It's up to the interviewee, I should say, to really understand how to get the information that's relevant here. If you're trying to make a decision on which of these segments to enter, you would want to do that based on the size of each of the markets. And this is kind of an important point generally for strategy decisions and case interviews at large, which is about prioritization. Prioritization is kind of the essence of most of the case interview process, and you could probably say one of the essence of management consulting in general and strategy in general, which is making trade-offs among various options in order to achieve some type of goal. Here, it's not reasonable to go into every single marketplace in order to achieve maximum success. You probably need to target one or two segments that are the most profitable and enter there, win that segment, and then grow further. In this case, you can probably already give a quick insight to say, well, I probably don't want to go after the rare readers. Why would I launch a reading product in a rare reader category? It's pretty counterintuitive. In addition, they don't have the highest willingness to pay for a book, nor are they nearly as frequent readers as others, so we're going to lose some revenue on the books. So you get this chart, you want to walk through it. Really key thing is you're going to talk through what's the title, give some insights around each of the different areas, then understand what you're going to want to do next. So you might want to end this discussion with something like, based on this information, I'd like to figure out the overall market size of each of these segments, and then from there, make a decision on which of these segments is the most attractive to enter. After you've introduced that, then you can start doing some math. Make sure you title. This is key. This will help you remember what it is you're doing, what goal you're trying to do. In this case, you're trying to make a decision about which of the market segments to go into. And then you'll have to ask something like, what is the actual price for each of the books? The interviewer will tell you it's $10 per book. Then you might also want to clarify, well, I know it says a willingness to pay. I'm going to assume that that's the price for each of the segments that we have here. But is it safe to assume that there's one book per person per year? Or is it more frequent that they'll actually buy a few readers? Maybe they have one at home and one for work, one for their commute, and one to read at home. They might have a few, maybe they'll buy more than one, but is it safe to assume that you'll just have one e-reader per person? And you might want to just check in with your interviewer about that. And notice how I phrase that. It's not a, how many e-readers per person would you do, interviewer? You want to say, I'm going to assume that it's one e-reader per person. Does that seem safe? Is that a good idea? Just want to check in. It's not asking for information. It's more of a check-in. Let's go further into our page here. So as we said before, the page layout is the left-hand side is kind of your notes for your meeting. It's not really a place for you to write scratch math or anything like that. It's just a place for you to write notes. So if you get information like this, like $10 per book, you want to put that on the side here before you start putting it into your presentation layer. You should reserve the presentation layer only after you've really thought about what you need to write. I see a lot of people doing their market segments or like categories that they want to compare on the left-hand side and doing the math across. I would avoid this. I think that's a mistake. What you should really do is think about this like an income statement. An income statement starts with revenues, then goes to costs. Maybe you have gross margin, some taxes, and then leading into some kind of like net income at the end, some kind of final total. I think this is the right up and down layout that you want to think about for doing any types of tables. And really, once you're out of the framework, you should be thinking in terms of income statements down the left-hand side. Then across the top, you want to do your comparison points. For most income statements, they're comparing, 1 year to another. So year would definitely go across the top, just like you think about time along the x-axis. But also when you're doing things like comparing different market segments, different products, you want to put that across the top too, because it's really easy to compare 2, 3 columns, but it's very difficult to compare 3 different rows, especially because you're not even sure which one's the total column. You're going to have a few different columns across the top. You want to make sure the total is really clear, and the total should be at the bottom, nice and big.